Hey everybody, I would like to thank you for hopping on with us right now. We are doing live court coverage. As always, my name is Andrew Smith. You can find us on Twitter at action underscore the number 4 Assange. I am by myself this morning. There was some emergency issues, and Steve is not going to be able to be joining me. But I am excited as I get signed in here to everything to be able to go over court coverage live with you. Um, I'm going to get everything up and running, but I did just want to get the stream online before too long here because we did kick off court about 4 minutes ago. So I will be right back with you guys as I get everything set up. Cool. Thanks for hanging on there, everybody. So first up, I'm going to be reading through some of Kevin Gastola's tweets just to get us caught up for this morning. He says the fifth day of proceedings is the trial portion of the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's extradition hearing will begin shortly. I'll have live updates at this thread. Um, Eric Lewis, who is the practicing lawyer in the United States, knowledgeable on the trial and sentencing issues, is expected to take the witness stand. He'll testify on the way the legal system believes Assange would be exposed to flagrant denial of justice if put on trial in the U.S. Lewis's testimony will likely return to the issue of the Trump administration's retaliation against the International Criminal Court, which is investigating the U.S. torture and war crimes, and how it connects to the Assange case. And then he has a little statement here. This is number 222. On November 20th, 2017, the International Criminal Court prosecutor Bensouda submitted to the pretrial chamber a request to open a formal investigation against the U.S. in respect to the war crimes committed by U.S. troops and by the CIA in Afghanistan and elsewhere in connection with the war on terror in Afghanistan. Uh, Kevin continues, Julian Assange enters wearing a mask. Summers, his attorney, is addressing the court on mask wearing. But both prosecution and defense legal teams are wearing masks in court for the first time. Judge Breitster addresses the jailers and says Assange must have the opportunity to wear a mask should he choose to do so. Summers said Assange was provided a mask today, but there have been difficulties before today, and they have taken instruction from Assange through the glass. Breitster notes that last week's witness, Trevor Timm, was drinking coffee while giving testimony. She said that it is inappropriate and future witnesses should not drink coffee while her court is in session. So, not allowed to drink coffee in court anymore, apparently. You'll offend a judge that no one knows anything about. Kevin continues. Eric Lewis takes the proverbial witness stand. Assange's legal team begins questioning. Fitzgerald asks, what is significant? Fitzgerald asks if it was significant that Assange wasn't indicted until 2018 when Manning was prosecuted. Lewis replies, it is significant in my view. I'm not sure if it's different from the prior witnesses, but the audio sounds like Eric is testifying inside of a wrapping paper tube. Kind of hard to follow everything he's saying. So more issues with the connections and the comm services. It's 5 o'clock in the morning here, flying solo, and I'm able to get this up and running. But with that, I hope everyone can hear me. So I'm going to hop over to chat real quick as I finished up Kevin's thread. And if you guys have any questions, if you want a little bit more context on anything that I may have just read over, please let me know. I apologize here. I'm just trying to get the chat going. Oh, thank you. Cool. So I'm going to hop over to Mohammed Almazi's thread that he has going on right now. And I'm going to put Kevin's in the chat just so everyone can read and get caught up. And then this next one is Mohammed. So he's generally, well, last time, it was Thursday, I think he was actually outside the court. So he had a little bit of a different perspective. So let's see what he has going on here. The COVID-19 test from Mrs. Dobbins, if everyone remembers, came back negative. Friday saw no hearing due to the possibility of a COVID outbreak in court. And Thursday saw an admin hearing only. There have been difficulties in getting Mr. Assange a mask. Mark Summers, QC, tells the court. The judge tells security that he must have the opportunity to use a mask at every proceeding if he so chooses. Mr. Assange is wearing a mask currently. Eric Lewis, chairman of Reprieve US, the defense expert witness due to give testimony now, has not appeared via video link. The court is trying to secure the connection with him. And this was as of 22 minutes ago. Eric Lewis has connected. Eric Lewis began by stating that he is not a member of the Justice Department, that he was not a member of the Justice Department, do not have inside information, and is speaking from experience observed. No publisher has ever been successfully prosecuted for publishing national security information ever. He continues, we will begin with a background when we look at the news articles, which in my view have a great deal of credibility and coordination, to make clear that the DOJ view that there was an impediment to proceedings that would be overwhelming, that was referring to the New York Times problem. He finds the report credible for a number of reasons. One, there was named DOJ officials in the article, including Matthew Miller, Attorney General Holder's number 2, and he doubts that he would have made such statements without running it by the Attorney General first. And so that concluded Mo's thread. So I'm going to hop over here into Juan Passarelli's, and I just put that link in chat for everybody. Remember, there are 40 civil society, human rights, and political observers from around the world that were given access to the video link, and the access was revoked at the last minute. They include Amnesty International, Reporters Without Borders, Human Rights Watch, and European Ministers of Parliament, and legal observers. The court commences, but Mr. Assange was not present yet. This was as of 40 minutes ago, so I'm just starting up at the top of his thread just so everyone's aware. And he says, reminder, Julian Assange is facing 175 years for the conduct that the U.S. government considers journalism and is protected by the First Amendment. 35 minutes ago. Assange is wearing a mask, but the judge says it is at the discretion of those who attend to wear masks inside the court, and it is not required to wear a mask in court. The judge asked the jailer that Mr. Assange should be given the opportunity to wear one if he wants to. Let me continue here because he pulls up a tweet from the Defend Assange account. So let me drop that link into chat. So as I'm going through, if you have any questions, please let me know. I see Independent Outsider asked, if Assange is extradited, would he still... Oh, it jumped on me. Would he still be flown to Virginia? Yes, if he is extradited, he will face court in the Eastern District of Virginia, also known as the Espionage Court. I believe that is the same court where John Kiriakou, Chelsea Manning, and multiple other whistleblowers and have been prosecuted. This will be the first time that a publisher is prosecuted, at least here within the United States, under the Espionage Act. Let me continue with this tweet here. So this is the one from Assange offense that Juan Passarelli put into his actual tweet thread. He says that Eric Lewis is being contacted to begin testimony. Lewis is a lawyer for Reprieve, and he represents Guantanamo Bay and Afghan detainees in litigation, seeking redress and accountability for torture and religious abuse while in U.S. custody. Judge Baratster noted that Trevor Tim was drinking coffee, and that witnesses should be reminded that this behavior is inappropriate. So don't drink coffee or you'll offend Vanessa Baratster. Concerns raised by the prosecution about the time allowed for cross-examination, expected 4 hours with Eric Lewis today. Fitzgerald, who is on the defense team, why didn't the Obama administration prosecute Assange? Lewis, no publisher of information has ever been successfully prosecuted for publishing information. The Department of Justice at the time said on record that they had all but decided not to prosecute Julian Assange. Fitzgerald, we know that Assange was then prosecuted under the Trump administration. Lewis, Mr. Trump said in 2010 that Assange should get the death penalty. Mr. Pompeo in 2017 was head of the CIA and said that WikiLeaks is a non-state hostile intelligence agency. Lewis, it was Pompeo's view that the First Amendment did not apply to Julian Assange. Lewis continues, Mr. Jeff Sessions, former Attorney General, said that Assange should be arrested, and shortly thereafter, he was. Around the time when Trump said that they were going to get tough on leakers. So I'm going through and refreshing everybody's threads here, just making sure just seeing if there's anything new that's coming up. And I'm going to hop over to the thread I linked last. This is the Defend Assange, and I'm going to pick up with Eric Lewis. I'm not going to start all the way back up at the top with this. We have Lewis is also expected to discuss the cruelty and inhumane treatment that Assange will likely face in U.S. jails and prisons. Lewis is testifying that it's significant that Assange was indicted in 2018 for allegations for actions alleged in 2010, not during the Obama administration. No publisher has been prosecuted for just publishing. So we begin with the background. A number of articles credible to me make it clear that there was an impediment to prosecuting that was overwhelming, referred to within the Justice Department as the New York Times problem. Once again, the significance of Horowitz's 2013 Washington Post article, Assange unlikely to face U.S. charges over publishing classified documents, because the distinction between the leaker and the publisher. and that is the New York Times problem. Eric Lewis refers to the Pentagon Papers case. The government alleged national security risks. The Supreme Court declined to prevent their publication and defined a series of standards in balancing public interest and First Amendment protections. Prosecution has attempted to portray the Obama administration simply as having not made the decision to prosecute, rather than affirmatively deciding not to prosecute. But Lewis finds it credible that the Obama Department of Justice decided not to due to the credibility of this article, quoting a Department of Justice official. Lewis, on the Trump administration's view of Assange, now going to then CIA Director Mike Pompeo's quite remarkable comments on Assange in a speech in April 2017. Pompeo, 2017, WikiLeaks pretended that America's First Amendment freedoms shield them from justice. They may have believed that, but they were wrong. Lewis talked about then U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions calling the arrest of Julian Assange a priority, directed by the Department of Justice to take another look at the case. Motivations of the First Amendment. Lewis says the timing was to make sure that the prosecution was within the limitation period, but not indicated a justice official's directing federal prosecutors to set a tone against leaking, with the details and theories to come out in full later. And who do you see as behind the superseding indictment of May 2019? Second superseding indictment goes to a whole new place. Makes clear that unlike the first indictment, disclosing information is not a First Amendment issue for this administration. And the New York Times problem was blown out of the water, also indicating a willingness to go after cases on the say-so of administration officials. The adding of 17 additional charges of espionage, with the jeopardy that comes with it, and the First Amendment implications, indicates a prosecution that reflects the new administration and Mr. Barr's view that he acts at the behest of the president. And the president effectively directs prosecution. Abuse of the criminal law enforcement power. The fact that the case and the allegations go back years and years reflect the political change and part of the new administration's view towards the press and leaking. Lewis, Mr. Kronberg, Assistant U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, offers no basis for new charges years later without new evidence. Knows the previous administration didn't prosecute, offers no explanation for the charges or for the changes in decision. Significant of the potential prison sentence would go on for the rest of Julian's life. Kronberg suggests that it would only be 4 to 6 years. Lewis, going from 1 to 18 counts could be prosecuted as one count. They are not. And again, that was the Defend Assange account, and I will drop that link back into the chat. Before I start going back through everything here, if anyone has any questions, please let me know. Restream is making me select a whole bunch of school buses real fast so I can get back in to see the chat, so just bear with me for a second, guys. I'm sorry. There we go. So that was that thread again. And let me know if everyone can still hear me okay. And I apologize if I'm like fumbling over some words and shit sometimes. We are going to switch back over here to Kevin Gastola's thread. So let me drop this link back in the chat for everybody. So where we had left off, Kevin said, not sure what the difference is from prior witnesses, but the audio sounds like Eric Lewis is testifying from inside of a wrapping paper tube. Kind of hard to follow everything he's saying. said Lewis said the second indictment shows the New York Times problem had been blown out of the water and is no longer an impediment to prosecuting Assange. Lewis believes if Assange is put on trial and sentenced, that he will effectively be served with what amounts to a life sentence since he is 49 years old. Lewis estimates if everything went brilliantly, a trial, then the best case scenario would be 20-year sentence for Assange, noting Chelsea Manning received 35 years in a U.S. military court. And if you could, everybody, please go through and like and retweet these threads, make some comments on them, give your own little editorials to them. So I just put Mohammed Almazi's thread in there, where we had left off. We begin with that background and look at the news article, which, in my view, has a great deal of credibility and corroboration that makes it clear that the DOJ's view was an impediment to prosecuting that would be overwhelmingly referred to as the New York Times problem. And I believe Mo was talking about Lewis here. He said he finds the report credible for a number of reasons. For one, there was a named DOJ official, Matthew Miller, who was Attorney General Eric Holder's number 2, and he doubts that he would have made such a statement without running it by the Attorney General first. The decision to change Mr. Assange's 18 offenses, including 17 under the Espionage Act, is the view of Mr. Eric Lewis an abuse of criminal law enforcement power. Mr. Lewis says that Mr. Assange, if convicted, would likely be sentenced to imprisonment that will go on for the rest of his life. Best case scenario is somewhere between 20 years if everything goes brilliantly to 175. Mr. Lewis thinks that it is quite likely that special administrative actions will be applied pre and post conviction. I do not know if you guys remember, but we earlier in the year went through about 4 weeks of reviewing the special administrative actions, and what those are, just in case you don't know. As pleasant as it sounds, it's actually one of the most brutal forms of torture within the United States, at least psychologically. They limit your access to family and friends, as well as the communications that family and friends are allowed to have with the court system, as well as with each other. So while under special administrative actions, every communication you have is observed by the court itself. They're allowed, or not necessarily by the court, but by a prisoner or by a prison guard or something like that. And if there is a topic that they do not want you to talk about, they can end whatever meeting you're having immediately. There is a almost total reporting gag where there's only information allowed to come out is the one from the judge itself, where the friends and family, the lawyers, they aren't allowed to contact the media. It's only the word of the U.S. government through the judge releasing information. On top of that, these people placed in special administrative actions get put on essentially a media lockdown to where they don't really receive accurate and up-to-date information. If one of the lawyers or an attorney or a family member that does get the off chance to visit tries to communicate information, they can just end it immediately. There's no more attorney-client privilege under special administrative actions because the prison essentially needs to know if there's anything that's being said that they need to remove or stop them from communicating about, which I personally think is heinous. But I will try to find the show doc where we had talked about special administrative actions, special administrative measures, to be able to get that article and put it back up there. And it may honestly be worth going through again because on Tuesday we're going to have Ray McGovern with us. But while these threads are populating a little bit more, I just wanted to take a minute here to shout out the calls to actions that we have up right now. If you go to action4assange.com, we have multiple calls to action, and we're going to be getting multiple more up. Bear with me here as my webpage loads up. But right now we have coordinating with Reporters Without Borders to contact congressional candidates in regards to amending the Espionage Act. I have a bunch of different candidates up there, and I'm continually putting more up. but just to run through the list of them real fast. I have what we're calling the NatSec 6 and their replacements in Congress. What those people are the sitting Democrats that decided to send a letter to, I want to say it was either Mike Pompeo or Mike Pence, requesting that they pressure Ecuador to removing Julian Assange from the embassy. We have candidates that were endorsed by President Trump in battleground states for congressional races, Green Party candidates, East Coast Libertarian candidates, as well as everyone's favorite, the brand new Congress and Justice Democrat members, and a few others. So I'm going to drop this link here in the chat. There is a draft email down at the bottom. I do ask that when you send emails, you heavily edit the one that's at the bottom, if you choose to use that as a draft, or please write your own. This is something that could actually make a big difference. I won't get into the whole thing, but it explains in the call to action what Reporters Without Borders is trying to do and why we decided to partner with them. We have the hearings must be heard call to action, which this is a follow-up because our community did win the video conference software that they currently use that currently causes a lot of problems sometimes. And this is called the Cloud Video Platform. This second hearing, or this second warning, is essentially to make sure that it is maintained properly. If you are so ambitious, please demand that there is a public video link given for the general public. But this is specifically trying to at least get international groups like Reporters Without Borders, Amnesty International, as well as like parliamentarians and politicians around the world who want to watch it, access to this cloud video platform. I do personally think that everyone in the public should be able to see this, that if this show trial is going to go on, it should at least be able to be scrutinized by the public. But unfortunately, reading tweets at 6 o'clock in the morning is the closest that we are going to get right now. So please hop on that call to action and get those emails sent out. Those are to the different complaint lines throughout the British court system. We do have one to contact the Department of Justice, and that's just educating them while this whole process is going on. Not that they aren't aware, but that there may be some people inside that aren't aware that may potentially be able to be a whistleblower one day. And then this one I think is pretty cool. This is actually contacting the U.S. Pardon Office, and I will drop that in the chat. It has the email as well as the phone number and the form that you fill out online to be able to request a pardon from or information from the U.S. Pardon Attorney. So if you could, everyone, please send as many as you can, as many submissions, emails, and phone calls into them as you could. Just as a little update, I am back in Cleveland for a couple days. I have to get caught up on some work stuff. We do have Kimber and a couple others still out in DC. I will put our agenda up because this week we are going to simply be outside of the Department of Justice most of the time. So I put that up in chat for everybody to see that schedule. But also, one last thing here from the website, last piece of house cleaning before I dive back into the actual Twitter threads themselves so we can keep going with the court trial. This is the action submission box. If you do decide to go out and take an action, you can come in here, you can drop it off to us and let us know. You do have to sign in with a connected Google account. But if you're interested in sharing your action and you don't want us to miss it on Twitter or through DMs or anything like that, please let us know through here. And this will be something that we go through every once in a while, just pulling them up and resending them out. But yeah, let me dig back in and see where we're at with everybody. So where we left off, Mohammed Almazi said, Mr. Lewis thinks that that it's quite likely that special administrative measures will be applied pre and post conviction. Mr. James Lewis QC is now cross-examining Mr. Eric Lewis. He asked him if he is being paid for his testimony and if they are discussing his obligation as an expert. So apparently, Mr. Lewis, Prosecutor Lewis, James Lewis QC, piece of shit Lewis, is again just trying to discredit the witnesses, doesn't have any actual questions to ask, at least for this initial first step here. So um, I'm going to hop over to Juan Passarelli's. Um, I'm just trying to figure out where we left off. So, as of 17 minutes ago, most espionage cases in the past have resulted in life sentences. Lewis said this indictment all points to a very long sentence going into many decades. Lewis continues, and I believe this is Eric Lewis, the witness. It is certainly that Assange will be placed under special administrative measures. It is quite likely that Assange will be kept under special administrative measures even post-conviction, usually kept on AVX, Colorado. Not sure what AVX is, maybe a prison. He would not be allowed to associate with other prisoners. He would be isolated um, at least for a long time. Moving on to the International Criminal Court and its investigations into war crimes, where the WikiLeaks document would be crucial and that the Trump administration is trying to block, including blocking the assets of non-U.S. nationals that are even attempting to help in that are even trying to help in the investigation. And that's where the defense finishes up. Eric Lewis, the witness, is referred to as ES, and James Lewis, prosecutor, as JS. Prosecutor Lewis, asking if he's being paid. Eric Lewis, he is being paid as a witness. Prosecutor Lewis asks if he understands what an expert witness, and starts with the credibility dance. Eric Lewis, I don't know that I am required to include Mr. Kronberg's every affidavit. Otherwise, my report would be hundreds and hundreds of pages. Eric Lewis continues, before I became an expert, I expressed my own political views on the matter. Prosecutor Lewis, your views are that he shouldn't be indicted. Eric Lewis, yes, those are my views. Prosecutor Lewis, isn't this a conflict of interest? Eric Lewis, I can interpret the law in an independent manner. So apparently, wanting, for any reason, there to be a free press is a conflict of interest. So I would actually levy against these people, right, against Prosecutor Lewis, and ask him who's paying him to be here. Is it the U.S. defense or the U.S. prosecution that's paying him to be there? And if it is, doesn't he think that that's a conflict of interest in representing a case, that he should be an impartial prosecutor? It's fucking stupid. Switching back over here, I'm going to see where the Defend Assange team is. Sorry. They linked to an executive order, so I'm going to get that popped up, and I think that was about the International Criminal Court. So I will read through that in a second, but Lewis confirms that he's not retained as this is Eric Lewis continuing from about 9 minutes ago. Lewis confirms that he is not retained as a lawyer for Assange. He is being paid by the legal aid rate as an expert, £100 an hour. Prosecution each time asks witnesses if they are aware that they must give an unbiased and objective opinion. Discussing Lewis giving his views on this case in the press before acting as an expert. His views were that the U.S. should not prosecute and that the UK shouldn't extradite. Um, and Lewis continues, and they are still my views. And then it links, I believe this is to the Independent article. Eric Lewis in the Independent, May 2019. As an American lawyer, I don't want to see Julian Assange extradited to my country. June 24th, 2019. UK signs Julian Assange's extradition papers. So I will go through these as possible, but to continue, Lewis is talking about his experience underlying his expertise in prison conditions in the U.S. Prosecutors trying to undermine him as an expert on prisons. This is something that U.S. prosecutor Lewis always does for no ass reason. And it's because they don't actually have any arguments. So what the prosecution is trying to do, instead of addressing the actual issues present in court, they just try to say, well, hey, this guy's not reading from that 350-page affidavit that we gave him yesterday. How dare he not get through 350 pages of legalese in one stinking night? But Lewis said, I have studied prisons and spent a lot of time in prisons, but I am not a warden. The prosecution, please don't give a speech. The prosecution establishes Lewis hasn't written on prisoners in an article that has been peer-reviewed, hasn't visited ADX in Colorado. The prosecution, we agree Assange will be held in the we agree Assange will be held in Alexandria, Virginia. Lewis has represented one client held there and visited, but not since. I'm actually going to run and grab a bottle of water real quick because I'm dying right now. Give me just a second. I will, as I'm coming through here again though, when I get back, grab some questions from the chat, and then that's the link to Kevin Gastola's thread that I'll be picking back up on. So give me just a minute. Okay, I am back. Sorry about that. I'm looking through chat here. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. I'm not seeing any in there right now. But I'm going to swing back over here to Kevin Gastola's article. Let me see. As this is loading up, Jay Lewis immediately starts out with a line of alleged bias. Eric Lewis, I don't know that I'm required to set out Mr. Kronberg's half a dozen affidavits. I am not aware otherwise. My reports would be hundreds and hundreds more pages. So let's see where Mo is at. Again, I'm sorry, I'm just reading through all these different threads right here. So Juan Passarelli's continues. This is James Lewis, the prosecutor, is asking for short answers. Speaks up. Fitzgerald objects by saying that his witness needs to answer the question. James Lewis is trying to discredit Eric Lewis's expertise in jails. Eric Lewis says that he has spent quite a lot of time inside of the Virginia prison. James Lewis tries to lead the witness in saying that a former client of his was acquitted in the same jury pool that Assange would face. Eric Lewis, this is incorrect, sir. He was acquitted in the District of Colorado, not the one in Virginia. James Lewis continues. This is prosecutor James Lewis. Actually asked if the fact that his client was under SAMS prevented his acquittal. And then Juan says, I will not add the comment I have in my head. That's quite wonderful. Let me hop over to the Defend Assange campaign. So the prosecution is trying to establish that Eric Lewis, the witness, hasn't written on prisons in an article that has been peer reviewed. Sorry, and that he hasn't visited ADX in Colorado. The prosecution: we agree Assange will be held in Alexandria, Virginia. Lewis has represented one client there and has not visited since. Lewis represented Abu Khatala, I'm terrible with names, who was acquitted of some counts that the government withdrew capital offenses after the defense submissions. Lewis corrects the prosecution that it was not the same jury pool that Assange would face, which is the District of Virginia, not the Eastern District, or District of Columbia. Lewis's client was held in special administrative measures, creating difficulties, very serious issues with classified information. So I did spend time with him, but it was neither easy nor rapid. Prosecutor Lewis says, did special administrative measures prevent him from facing trial? Did SAMS prevent his acquittal? Lewis can't understand or believe the question. Legal visits were, and I believe that the Lewis it's referring to here can't understand or believe the question is referring to Eric Lewis, the witness right now. Legal visits were monitored and recorded. We were told that the audio wasn't recorded. We were told that the audio wasn't recorded, but we weren't certain. Told that the team monitoring the recordings wasn't the same as the prosecution team. But I've seen too many cases where this was not the case. Let me just refreshing everybody's stuff here real quick. So I do have, because they were referring to the International Criminal Court there for a little bit, I do have the executive order that was being referred to. So let me pull this up real fast for everybody. So I do have a question in chat before I get to this. Why doesn't Assange just secretly tell contacts attorneys to make a deal, no indictment, but keep it secret. I don't really think that that makes sense. There was a back channel set up between Dana Rohrabacher, Kim.com, and Donald Trump, where Donald Trump was offering to pardon Julian if and only if he revealed the name of the 2016 DNC emails, which we all know to be Seth Rich. Julian is much more principled than that and does not reveal sources, as is the policy of WikiLeaks. He did, however, do multiple interviews in and around the topic about 6 months before this back channel was established, saying that it was not the Russian state or any state actor that released the information to him, although he would not say who it was. However, he did offer, I believe it was a $20,000 reward for anyone who could provide information in regards to Seth Rich and getting him justice and finding out who his captor was. Or killer, not captor. So, the executive order on blocking the property of certain persons associated with the International Criminal Court. I'm not going to read through this entire thing because it's way longer than I can probably manage. But I will go through a little bit of it before we get back into the tweets. So, Donald Trump, President of the United States of America, find the situation with respect to the International Criminal Court and its illegitimate assertion of jurisdiction over personnel of the United States and certain of its allies, including the International Criminal Court prosecutors' investigation into actions allegedly committed by the U.S. military intelligence and other personnel in or relating to Afghanistan, threatens to subject current and former United States governments and allied officials to harassment, abuse, and possible arrest. These actions on part of the International Criminal Court in turn threaten to infringe upon the sovereignty of the United States and impede upon our critical national security and foreign policy work of the United States government and allied officials, thereby threatening the national security and foreign policy of the United States. The United States is not a part of the Rome Statute, no shit, has never accepted the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction over its personnel. I actually think that that's wrong. I think there was a period of time before 9/11 that we were in the one of the member countries of the International Criminal Court. I could be wrong there, but I'm not positive. I think it was Baby Bush that pulled us out, potentially Clinton, but again, I'm not entirely sure. So if I am wrong, please correct me on that. Furthermore, in 2002, the United States Congress enacted the American Service Members Protection Act, which rejected the International Criminal Court's overbroad, non-consensual assertion of jurisdiction. The United States remains committed to accountability and the peaceful cultivation of the international order. But the International Criminal Court and parties of the Rome Statute must respect the decision of the United States and other countries not to subject their personnel to the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction, consistent with the respective sovereign prerogatives. The United States seeks to impose tangible and significant consequences on those responsible for the International Criminal Court's transgressions, which may include the suspension of entry into the United States of ICC officials, employees, and agents, as well as their immediate families. Entry of such aliens to the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, and denying them entry will further demonstrate the resolve of the U.S. in opposing the International Criminal Court's overreach by seeking to exercise jurisdiction over personnel of the United States and its allies, as well as personnel of countries that are not party to the Statute of Rome, or have not otherwise consented to the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction. That was a lot. I apologize. But that is a portion of the executive order where our government basically said, like, no, we're war criminals and there's nothing you can do about it. So I am refreshing all the Twitter threads here real quick to be able to dig back into this. And I may see if Stefania Maruzzi is live tweeting right now too. But I just have to be careful with my bandwidth so I don't lag my computer out here. And just a heads up, I probably got about another hour to keep doing this. Like I said, I am back in Cleveland for a couple days as I get everything resituated with my work. Steve did have some emergency family issues that he had to expeditiously fly back to California to attend. We still have people on the ground in DC, including the always wonderful Mean Panda Kimber, who is out there holding it down. We are going to be outside of the Department of Justice every single day this week from about 3 until 6 o'clock. So I look forward to everybody that's going to be joining us out there. But just to dig back in, Kevin Gostola has another tweet up. We left off with prosecutor James Lewis immediately starts out with lines of questioning of alleged bias. Eric Lewis, the witness, I didn't know that I was required to set out Mr. Kronberg's half a dozen affidavits. I'm not aware. Otherwise, my reports would be hundreds and hundreds of more pages. As everything loads. James Lewis is challenging through many questions whether the court can consider Eric Lewis an expert on prison conditions. So this is what the prosecution does every single time. We know they have no fucking case. We have a First Amendment. Julian revealed war crimes. He helped Chelsea Manning not crack a password to try to download videos, which isn't even inherently illegal. They got nothing. The prosecution literally has nothing. So all they're doing at this point is hoping that they can buy time. They had on Thursday, Mrs. Dobbins raves the COVID flag, just as James Lewis, prosecutor Lewis, forgot his laptop charger, forgot his official paperwork, woke up in a house that wasn't his house in London, but one of his lofts. So the prosecution knows that they're fucked. So they can literally only try to just discredit every witness that comes up. So it's pretty disgusting that the judge even lets this go on, because if every time a witness comes up, the prosecution's literally like, oh, we don't know if you're an expert, then they're obviously fucking stupid. But, sorry. To pivot back to Mohammed Almazi's, Mr. Lewis, and this is referring to Eric Lewis, thinks that it is quite likely that special administrative measures will be applied pre- and post-conviction. Mr. James Lewis, who is the prosecutor, QC, I don't even know what QC means. If anyone knows what that James Lewis QC means, please let me know, because I'm not sure what that QC actually stands for. So Mo is a little behind the court here, so let me see where Juan is and where the defense team is. Cool. So, James Lewis, do you agree that there is no solitary confinement in prisons where Assange would be kept? Eric Lewis, no. This is a semantic issue. 22 hours a day in a cell without any association with any other inmate is solitary confinement. So, killed it on that question, and we've historically seen the prosecution not even be able to ask questions without literally all of them just getting thrown back in their face, which is why, in my opinion, they waved the surrender flag on Thursday to try to give them 4 days to prepare to figure out how to be assholes in court this week. But Prosecutor Lewis, this is switching back over to the Defend Assange article, or the Defend Assange Twitter thread as of 20 minutes ago. Prosecutions, we agree Assange will be held in Alexandria. Lewis has represented one client there and has not visited since. We already read through that one. Lewis's client was held in special administrative measures, created difficulties and very serious issues with classified information. So I did spend time with him, but it was neither easy nor rapid. Queen's Counsel? Okay. Interesting. And again, if anybody has any questions, please let me know. I'm again on the Defend Assange Twitter at Defense Assange. Um, so talking about others held in federal prisons, the prosecution brings up one of the 9/11 planners in the ADX in Colorado on life without parole, and Maria Bonita. Sorry if I pronounced that name wrong, probably did. Talking about the submission where Assange's extradition would contrive the European Court of Human Rights. The defense notes the issues with the European Court of Human Rights and Articles 3 and 5, not just 3. Discussing prison conditions, national security inmates are placed quite frequently in administrative segregation or solitary confinement. Discussing many reasons for placing someone in administrative segregation. Prosecution, you agree that there is no solitary confinement? Lewis, no, that is a semantic issue. The administrative segregation is solitary, other than in the vernacular of the Bureau of Prisons. So, Prosecutor Lewis, also not in the vernacular of the European Court of Human Rights. Witness Lewis, I would suggest that 22 hours a day in a 50 square foot cell with no contact with other prisoners, causing people deterioration significantly, in my view, is solitary confinement. This is Prosecutor Lewis. Was your client held in solitary confinement? Lewis, I believe so, and he believes so. Prosecutor, administrative segregation allows unlimited visits by his lawyer. No, not unlimited. Certainly not in practice. So again, I'm going to drop these links in here for everybody. Make sure I get up to date on all these threads. And let me know what you guys are thinking right now, because this is pretty ridiculous. This is pretty much every witness at this point has been attacked simply on the basis of credibility, which is pretty insane in my opinion, that they can't even focus on the actual issue of the case itself, which is press freedom, the ability to communicate with your sources, the right to ask for more information, the right for a publisher to have and then publish classified information, and simply the fact that there is no such thing as a publisher or journalist in legal U.S. terms, where any person acting in a way to spread information is a journalist, and if they put the information up there in print form, they're a publisher. So I think that that's always a really important distinction to make, because some countries do have a publisher class or a journalist class of people. The U.S. does not. The First Amendment specifically does not create that distinction, which I think is pretty important, because then there's no licensing requirements or anything like that. So what I am doing here in and of itself is a form of press. So I'm going to hop back over and refresh the threads. And again, if you have any questions, just let me know. I always feel weird doing solo shows, so any questions you guys have will probably make that seem a little less strange. So this is back to Kevin Gastola's, and we left off with James Lewis, who's the prosecutor and Queen's Counsel, apparently. That's what QC means. Through many questions, whether the court can consider Eric Lewis an expert on prison conditions. And then we have Kevin Gastola saying, asked if the Alexandria Detention Center does not have solitary confinement. Eric Lewis says, this is a semantic point. The vernacular of the Bureau of Prison, it is not the vernacular that the Bureau of Prisons would use. And that is something that was pointed out in Juan's thread as well, that simply changing the name of solitary confinement does not change solitary confinement. It is still isolation, torture, limited access to other inmates and attorneys. So just because they can call it a different thing, administrative isolation or whatever the fuck, doesn't actually make it not solitary confinement. So I'm glad that that distinction keeps getting brought up here by all these different threats, because I think that is super important to make sure we understand. Um, and then this, going back to Juan Passarelli's Twitter thread here, and I'm gonna go to the tweet that we left off on, which is James Lewis, prosecutor, saying, "Do you agree that there is no solitary confinement in the prison where Assange would be kept?" Witness Eric Lewis says, "No, it's a semantic issue. 22 hours a day without a cell, without association with any other inmates, is solitary confinement." Eric Lewis, there is not an unlimited number of visits because there are a lot of practical and logistical issues, including availability of rooms, FBI availability, and other issues now include COVID. And this is Lewis to the judge. I'm not sure which Lewis. I cannot control Mr. Lewis, and you are not. Okay, so I'm assuming this is Prosecutor Lewis talking to Vanessa Baraitster. I cannot control Mr. Lewis, and you are not controlling Mr. Lewis. He is giving speeches. I wish to be released of time limits. Baraitster says, the judge says she will stick to the time limits, and it is not my duty to control witnesses. I am here to ensure fairness. If anyone thinks Vanessa Baraitster is ensuring fairness, you can. Anyways, Lewis complains about the 4 hours he asked for saying that the judge. Lewis complains about the 4 hours he asked for saying that the judge who asked for saying that it is the judge who asked for a 4-hour limit. So Lewis literally is just QC prosecutor Lewis is literally just constantly taking it on the chin. He's like, well, solitary confinement doesn't exist. And then witness Lewis goes, yeah, it does. You put someone in a cell for a really long time by themselves, it's solitary confinement. And then prosecutor Lewis just cries to the judge and says, like, oh, this isn't fair. How can he answer questions when he's a fucking witness? I think it is funny, though, that prosecutor Lewis literally can't control his own line of questioning because of how bad it is. I'm not sure where he went to school for any type of formal training, but he probably should be re-educated at this point because he's not doing very good. I'm going to hop over here back to the defense Assange. Prosecutors examining Lewis's statement that Assange will be held in solitary confinement. Prosecutor Lewis, even prisoners subjected to SAMs are on a break schedule. Lewis said, this is tantamount to solitary. This is witness Lewis said, this is tantamount to solitary. Break schedule requires no other prisoners to be in the hallway, etc. And they're in the middle of the night. Break in testimony now. Also, prosecution wants to raise an issue without the witness present. Testimony will resume in 15 minutes. Prosecution raising an issue of limited time, complaining that Lewis gives a speech in all of his answers, doesn't think that he'll finish today. I'm feeling stressed to meet the time requirements and wish to release from the time constraints. Vanessa Baraitster says to prosecutor Lewis, it's within my right to impose limits, have asked for likely time needed and asked the defense to weigh in, and thus I've allowed you the time you need. You've asked for 4 hours. We are only half an hour in. I'm sorry you feel stressed. Maybe if you didn't forget your paperwork on your desk for a weekend with your laptop charger, you could have had a little more chance to prepare. But nonetheless, it is not the obligation of the court to control the witnesses. It is a matter of your questions. Prosecutor Lewis, you don't know the length of my cross-examination. I see this going into tomorrow morning, need to do justice to my client as well. Vanessa Baratester, if you are going to go beyond the given 4 hours, you will need to explain yourself. This is a case management issue. Prosecutor Lewis, I disagree. The court needs to explain why it's curtailing, not right to place the burden on me. I am not prepared to have to hurry through. You weren't prepared for court on Thursday, Lewis. What difference does it make? Like, seriously. You're telling me that 30 minutes in, you're going to start complaining about time constraints, which you had originally set because you can't control your line of questioning. And then all of a sudden, it's somehow the judge's fault, who's already a concierge of the State Department, who's already doing nothing but reading pre-prepared statements, right? It's that judge's fault that your witness is answering questions and it makes you seem dumb, and you're calling it speeches. The prosecutor, I'm sorry. If he's allowed to have a long rambling answer and I'm not allowed to stop him, it isn't right. The judge said it's a matter of how the question is asked. Prosecutor Lewis getting angry. That is not true. I asked close questions and he gave speeches. The judge said, it is up to you and how you ask. I need to let the witness answer the asked question. Prosecution. There is no judge in this building or any extradition case that I have ever been in that I have known the cross-examination to be guillotined. Witnesses cannot give rambling answers. I am not being given the opportunity to present my case. I hope he shortens his answers, but he hasn't thus far. He's literally, like, we've read, right? Like, you heard this. We've read these questions and these answers that are coming out, and they're rather straightforward. We've literally had the chance to read them multiple times even before the next one comes out. So, fuck you, Lewis. Fuck you, Dobbins, and fuck you, Baratester. At least you're putting on a show to stand against the prosecution, which is better than you've done for the last 63 weeks. So yeah, I'm going to run out real quick. I have to find a lighter, and I will be back in a couple seconds as everything reloads up, because this is actually getting pretty interesting. So hang on there with me. Okay, sorry about that. So let's pick this back up here with Prosecutor Lewis talking to Baratester. Lewis says, as we load in here, and this is, I'll share this tweet because I actually think this is pretty interesting, and I would try to retweet this as much as possible. Right, and it definitely so. Let the record show that James Lewis, the prosecutor representing the U.S. government, wasted 10 minutes complaining about not having the time to cross-examine Lewis. I like that. I put that link in there to this specific tweet because the tweets around it are the ones that's talking about this. So Prosecutor Lewis says there is no judge in this building or any extradition case that I've been in that I've known to cross-examine to be guillotined. Witnesses cannot give rambling answers. I am not being given the opportunity to present my case. I hope he shortens his answers, but he hasn't thus far. And the judge says, well, I'm glad you acknowledged my right to limit. The judge said, the word guillotine comes from you, and I've never used it. And that's the end of the matter as far as I am concerned. Prosecutor Lewis says, so be it. It's a shit show. Total shit show. Let me switch back over here to see where Mo is and where Juan is at. And also Kevin Gastola. Real quick, I'm going to steal myself off the screen really fast while I get this link together. Okay, I can pull my face back on now. Sorry about that. I don't know why I even did that. You couldn't even see the screen. I'm just really dumb, and it's super early. I want to see what Kevin's take is on this little altercation here. James Lewis, so picking up where we left off with Kevin, we were about 10 minutes ago, asked if the Alexandria Detention Center does not have solitary confinement. Eric Lewis says this is a semantic point that the vernacular of the Bureau of Prisons would use. So this is before James Lewis, the prosecutor, complained to the court, and this is just reiterating the fact that regardless of if you call it solitary confinement or not, 22 hours a day minimum isolation is solitary confinement. And I think it's important to point out that Julian has spent at least 23 hours a day for the last 500 some days in solitary confinement. Asked if the let me jump down here. James Lewis had the court sever the link with Eric Lewis to complain to the judge about the guillotine, which is the time limits on the witness. He is upset that Eric Lewis is giving answers to his questions beyond yes or no because it is taking longer than he wants. Vanessa Beratster says that this is not as much a guillotine as it is the case management. She rejects Prosecutor Lewis's request to control the witness. She says that it is the prosecutor's responsibility and that it is only fair if asked open questions for the witness to be able to answer. Let the record show that the prosecutor representing the U.S. government wasted 10 minutes complaining about not having enough time to cross-examine Eric Lewis. So I'm going to drop the link to this tweet because I would like everybody, if you could, to please tweet this out. This is from Kevin Gastola's thread. And I think it's just super important because fuck these guys. The prosecution's literally complaining about time being wasted while wasting time, which I don't think time's being wasted. You can see here that the answers that witness Eric Lewis is giving are actually really, really thought out and well spoken. But like every other day in court, the prosecution's getting their ass kicked. So, if anyone has any questions, please drop them in chat. I'm going to keep going here for about another 45 minutes or so. But just to let everyone know, we are still in DC. I am not currently in DC. I am back here in Cleveland for a couple days, just getting caught up on work stuff. Steve had some family emergencies that he had to go home and attend to. Kimber is still in DC along with a couple other volunteers. We will be outside of the Department of Justice every day from 3 until 6 p.m. And this is just educating them, and that is during this week. I should be back out there Friday at the latest, probably Wednesday at the earliest, should everything go well, getting caught back up at work here in Cleveland. Apparently, Crown Prince Andrew is studying journalism now, according to a member of the chat. Let me dive back in here. So we left off with Kevin Gosztola showing how, with Let the Record Show, James Lewis, the prosecutor representing the United States, wasted 10 minutes complaining about not having enough time to cross-examine witness Eric Lewis. The defense has around 20 witnesses left to call to the stand. Proceedings are supposed to wrap up the last week of September. This is impossible if Bratster gives James Lewis what he wants: unlimited time to cross-examine witnesses. So this is something Lewis did last week before they called the trial for the week because of Mrs. Dobbins' pretend coronavirus outbreak with her husband. But they're essentially trying to filibuster. And we already know this is a show trial. We already know everything that's going on in regards to them literally just trying to use process as punishment to go after Julian. This is over 3,500 days that he's been illegally and arbitrarily detained, according to the UN, with over 510 days in solitary confinement inside of Belmarsh Prison, which is the Guantanamo Bay of the United Kingdom. Kevin Gosztola continues. Eric Lewis was the attorney for Ahmed Abu Kahalata. I'm fucking terrible with names. Who is held at the Alexandria jail where Assange will likely be confined. Eric Lewis's client was suspected of being a Libyan militant alleged to have been involved in the Benghazi attacks, so a high-profile national security defendant. James Lewis asked if Eric Lewis's client was acquitted of murder charges by jurors from the same pool that Assange's jury would draw from. Eric Lewis responded, "No. My previous client's acquittal came in the U.S. District Court of the District of Columbia, where they have very different jury pools from the Eastern District of Virginia." So that gets us caught up with Kevin's thread. Let me just finish letting it load here to make sure. So I'm going to pop over back to Mohammed Al-Nazi real quick. The link to be severed for 15 minutes. And this is Mohammed's perspective on Lewis's badgering of Vanessa Bratster. Link to be severed for 15 minutes. James Lewis, QC, wishes to discuss the matter of the guillotine. I can't control Mr. Lewis, madam. You are not controlling Mr. Lewis. This is Prosecutor Lewis speaking to Bratster about Eric Lewis. We get a speech. I have done 1 1/4. I am feeling stressed because I am not able to do justice to my client. In the way that Mr. Lewis is giving evidence, I wish to be released from that, referring to the time constraints. The judge says, "I intend to proceed in the way you have asked for 4 hours, and you are thus far in 30 minutes. Can I say in relation to controlling the witness, it is not the obligation of the court to control the witness. It is a matter of fairness. It is only fair to allow the witness to answer in some instances where you have asked open questions." James Lewis, QC, the prosecutor, is very frustrated, but the judge says that it is precisely why he was asked to give the indication of how long he thought he would need in advance. Very interesting. But we know that Verraster has been nothing but a concierge of the State Department thus far. So I'm going to take this tweet and put it in the chat for you guys to retweet out. And I'm going to scroll through here real quick and see if there's any questions. Whose feed? Because I haven't had any trouble with mine freezing. If you guys are having some issues watching, let me know. Because we are streaming on the Unity for J channel, the Action for Assange channel, the D Live for Unity for J, as well as the Action for Assange Facebook page, and the Action for Assange Twitter right now. And let me... And if you guys aren't getting the links that I'm putting in chat, let me know too, because I don't know if they're going through on all platforms or just on YouTube or what have you. So, let me get back in here with Juan Passarelli's tweet. I left off with him where he says Lewis complains about the 4 hours he asked for, saying that it is the judge who asked for a 4-hour limit. Verraster says the witness is entitled to answer the questions he is asked in relation to the time you have given. You gave this time and you shall stick to this time. James Lewis has already today lost his temper with the witness as he cannot lead him into hypothetical madness. Also the defense, of course, and he almost got into a screaming match with the judge. I wish we had a public video link, because this needs to be seen, where the U.S. prosecution, even though they are given every opportunity and every chance to do whatever the fuck they want, they are still yelling at the judge and acting like something here is not proceeding properly. And I don't know why. James Lewis seems like he's getting pretty upset that he can't have a literal unlimited filibuster on every witness when we already, just to recap how much time we've lost, Monday last week, Mark Feldman, couldn't connect initially to give his witness testimony, was able to connect for a little bit, and then the hearings computer systems failed to the point that Mr. Feldman's testimony had to continue into the second day. So that is half of day one that we've lost. Day two, Mr. Feldman had to pick up with the second half of his testimony. So we lost the second half of day two. So between the first 2 days of court, we had one whole day of court. Then that puts us at Wednesday, which was an unabated day of court. So that's 2 days. Thursday shows up, Mrs. Dobbins and Mr. Lewis are unable to attend. James Lewis, for everyone to remember, woke up at his loft, called in late and said, I wasn't able to get home last night. I left my laptop charger on my desk in the courtroom, and I left all of my paperwork there. I don't know how we're going to proceed. I can't cross-examine witnesses like this. Vanessa Breitzer, to her credit, said, too bad, you probably should have been prepared. This is only like a massive international court case. At which point, Lewis fumbles around, tries to reconnect on another device. He can see, or he cannot see the court. The court cannot see him, but he can be heard in the court, and he can hear court. And Vanessa says, oh, we'll keep going. Like, here we go. Lewis says, and this was Thursday, that he couldn't cross-examine witnesses with the current level of technological issues that he was experiencing because he didn't have his laptop charger. He didn't have any of his notes. And then that's when the COVID flag got waved. When Mrs. Dobbins was like, oh, my husband's sick. But he wasn't. Test came back negative. I call bullshit. We called bullshit live as it was happening before. And all we're seeing is the U.S. trying to run the clock down at this point. And they still have 2 weeks to do it. So he literally yells, Lewis literally is screaming at the judge at this point, unable to control the witnesses because he can't get them to play hypothetical mind games with him. And that 350-page document that got released to people 24 hours before they testify apparently is kind of hard to get through, and the court sort of recognizes that. So let me continue here. We left off with Juan Passarelli saying James Lewis, the prosecutor, has already today lost his temper with the witness as he cannot lead him into hypothetical madness. Um, also, the defense, of course, and he got into a screaming match with the judge. The prosecutor expressed to the judge that he was feeling stressed with the answers from the witness and their time limits. I wonder how he managed when he was in the SAS. Court resumes, and James Lewis apologizes to the judge. Oh, isn't that nice? So let me refresh everybody here real quick. And I would like to kind of know your guys' opinions here on Lewis yelling at the judge, because I think it's hilarious. Literally nothing has been done to help the defense from the judge at this point. The bails were denied, everything was denied, built in a pre-prepared statement, put out. The defense would make their argument, and the judge would pick up her piece of paper and read it. So the fact that that James Lewis, the prosecutor, has the balls to say that anything in this court is not in his favor is literally just his own perception. And the fact that he's stressed out, I personally think is pretty hilarious. So it does not look like we have anything new from Kevin Gostola at this time. Or Mo. So let me see. We got another tweet from Juan Passarelli here 2 minutes ago. The prosecutor, which of those reasons would be used to place Assange in administrative segregation? This is getting back into the court proceedings. Court resumes after James Lewis apologizes to the judge. The prosecution says, which of these reasons would be used to place Assange in administrative segregation? Lewis says, believe a mental health illness has been raised, as well as the notoriety. The prosecution, we also agree that there's a procedure to determine that. And witness Eric Lewis says yes, but with no right to challenge. So let me... So this is loading up here for me again. And I try not to smoke cigarettes on camera too much, but it's super early, so just kind of is what it is. And I apologize if anyone is offended by my use of nicotine on camera. I'm just trying to get back here. Okay, returning from break, prosecutor James Lewis to the judge. I apologize if I used an intemperate language, ma'am. This dude literally has gotten everything he's wanted from this goddamn judge. He has 4 hours to cross-examine witnesses, and there's 20 witnesses. And like, I'm not that great at math, but that's a lot of time. But the cross-examination of Eric Lewis resumes. And Prosecutor Lewis, reviewing reasons someone would be placed in administrative segregation. Do you agree do you agree those are reasons for placing? Lewis says yes, with one condition. If Attorney General imposes special administrative measures, they are placed in administrative segregation. Prosecutor Lewis says Mr. Kronberg specifically says that there is no solitary confinement in the ADC. Do you disagree? Lewis says, yes, I disagree, because believes the distinction is semantic. So whether you call it administrative segregation or solitary confinement, it's still solitary confinement. The amount of time and all of that is still the fucking same. It's like calling torture enhanced interrogation. We know that they do it. We know that it's bullshit. We know that they're going to try to just play with words. This is what a tyrannical empire does. If you read through the manuals that came out about PR spin for Guantanamo Bay, this is the same kind of thing that they did. They just invent new words that the public hasn't had a visceral reaction to yet. reviewing whether Lewis has read the case of Ahmed with regard to the European Court of Human Rights, prosecution believes all issues Lewis raised have been dealt with and rejected in that case. So let me do some refreshing here real fast while I read through these. So all those are loading. I am going to hop back into the chat real fast. The prosecution, so the U.S. prosecutors asked for 4 hours per witness. And that is what Vanessa Baraitser granted them, at least in regards to Mr. Lewis. I don't know if the rest of them are going to operate that way, but at least specifically with Eric Lewis as a witness, it says that they are giving the prosecution 4 hours to filibuster this guy. Interviewkim.com. I have tried. I don't want to just blow holes and stuff, but I've sent direct messages to Kim.com, Pamela Anderson, Aaron Matei, and a bunch of other people trying to get them on here. I would love to do live court reporting with Kim.com. I think that would be wonderful. If anyone has anything better than Twitter DMs to help me get in contact with him, please let me know. But I would absolutely love to have him, just a nameplate, coming up and commentating and reading through these with me, because this is... I think he would get a kick out of it. If you didn't see it, I want to say it was Saturday. He actually popped in to CN Live unexpectedly to more or less just talk about the situation. So I hope that he actually gets to come in either for a vigil or for court reporting or what have you, because I am going to be up every day doing this at about 4 o'clock in the morning. That's the time that I had to get going for today. But that's my problem and no one else's. I am going to refresh again because it doesn't look like any new tweets have come out yet. And is there anything in chat that you guys have questions on? Is there anything that we've talked about in regards to the case right now that you may not completely understand? Just let me know. While everything's loading here, let me look. Sorry for the silence, guys. I'm trying to get everything loaded up. I can't have too many windows because the stream will lag, but if I don't have enough, then it makes everything pretty difficult to wade through. So, just bear with me. I don't think we have new tweets out by anybody yet. And I got about 20 minutes here before I'm hopping off. But I would ask that everyone pressure your favorite independent content creators to wake up early as fuck or stay up late to cover this. It's something that we've been trying to do. We've been talking about it with multiple people about how independent media really hasn't picked up the ball on Julian's case for whatever reason. And we'd like to see that change. The U.S. has tons and tons and tons and tons of independent media, and there is no excuse for them to not be up at 5 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast or be up at 2 o'clock in the morning on the West Coast doing this. Well, there are excuses, but there's not very many. So the fact that there's not other content creators actively out doing this right now is pretty disheartening. I can barely read. I'm dyslexic as fuck, and I'm still managing to get through this pretty well. So I just thank everybody for bearing with me here. It doesn't look like there has been any updates in these tweets yet. So while we're waiting for those to load, I am going to take a moment to shout out all of our calls to action again. Just as this is coming through here, we have multiple ones up. We have our coordinating with Reporters Without Borders to apply pressure to congressional candidates and elected officials, trying to get them to support an amendment to the Espionage Act. There has been a couple hundred emails sent out. I have not been able to get any other major content creators on board to call for this or to even recognize the fact that we're calling for this. So please share this call to action with independent media members as well, saying, hey, all of these people have been contacted. Brand new Congress has been put on blast. The Libertarians, the Green parties, Trump-endorsed candidates, the National Security Six that asked for Julian to be removed from the Ecuadorian embassy back in 2018, I believe. So share these call to actions. Action, the number 4, Assange.com. We also have pressuring the Department of Justice and educating them about Julian's situation. We have a link up that has the form for the pardon attorney's office, as well as the phone number for the pardon attorney's office and the email. Please send at least one email there and one form submission. If not, send a dozen. Please. Like, I don't think that asking for a presidential pardon is something that is too extreme for anybody to engage in right now. We will be, I have the email list up, putting out later today, hopefully soon, just depending on when I can sit down with my laptop, pressuring TYT. TYT, better or worse, they are an independent media company that exists. I have a bunch of different email addresses from those listed on their website. So please, once I put that up, please join it, because they are a major platform. They are someone that has the technical capabilities and staff to be able to do live court reporting, to talk about Julian's situation. At this point, having to get audiences caught up with Julian's situation before you can even move forward with the court trial, because even just picking the tweets up, people don't know about UC Global and the cases in and around there, and the spying that was in the Ecuadorian embassy. People don't know about the fact that Julian Assange has spent over 500 days in solitary confinement inside a Belmarsh prison. Most times when you talk with someone on the street, they say, well, where is he right now? And that is a failing of the media, most specifically the independent media, because no one expects the mainstream media to do what the mainstream media is supposed to do, which is educate people. They are corporatocracy news. So let me hop back here, because I'm not seeing any more tweets come through, and I hope I'm just not missing them. So we got everything loading. Graham Elwood has been doing a pretty good job too. And the Combo Couch has been doing a really good job. Nico House put out an update. Lee Camp put out some updates. Jimmy Dore put out some updates. But the situation is so monumental at this point that people need to get their audiences caught up. That this topic in and of itself, a 4-hour live stream, doesn't even scratch the surface of catching people up from 2016 until now, let alone trying to get people to go all the way back to 2010 to remember the fact that we had an anti-war movement, and to remember the fact that when these leaks came out, we found out as Americans about torture programs that our money was being used for. 15,000 civilian deaths that previously had gone unreported or were reported as enemy combatants. So we have somebody saying in chat, Jimmy is burning himself out. He needs reinforcements. I don't disagree. And most independent media creators feel that way. I know that doing things this heavy hitting aren't easy. But that's why we're here to provide support and encouragement and occasionally some shit talking just to try to get everybody to get their stuff together. We do have another tweet out here by Kevin Gostola, just to get caught up on the previous one. Prosecutor James Lewis asked if Eric Lewis's client was acquitted of murder charges by jurors from the same jury pool as Assange's jury would be drawn from. Witness Eric Lewis responds with no. My client's acquittal came in the U.S. District Court of the District of Columbia. They have very different jury pools from the Eastern District of Virginia. James Lewis references Abaramed's extradition case and suggests most of the issues raised from potential U.S. confinement conditions in Assange's case were raised before the European Court of Human Rights and rejected. And I am going to hop back over here to the Assange defense at Defense Assange, reviewing whether Lewis has read the case of Ahmed with regards to the European Court of Human Rights. Prosecutor Lewis believes all issues witness Lewis has raised have been dealt with and rejected in that case. Long back and forth, finding correct paragraphs, trying to establish whether these issues have been addressed. Prosecutor Lewis quotes Joshua Dartel. Special administrative measures cause irreparable difficulties in dealing with clients. Lewis says SAMs make it difficult to prepare for a trial, but create issues of unfairness when dealing with national security cases as this one. Lewis explains the unique difficulties under the special administrative measures in national security cases. Met with a client in a room in a prison cannot always deal with all documents involved. So again, we're gonna have to go back through special administrative measures just because there's so much, and that topic in and of itself is so heavy. That for Tuesday, when we go back with Ray McGovern, will most likely be joining us Tuesday. We were supposed to have him on Saturday, but unfortunately that did not work out just due to time and issues and him being involved in other events. But we will be having him join us on Tuesday, and I would like to go through some of the special administrative measures, if not with him, just in that same vigil. So Tuesday, 9 p.m., like always. And then end of today, we will be doing a overall court review and wrap up too. I have to coordinate with Steve on that because he did have some family emergencies that he had to literally rush back to California for, as hard as that is to do from Washington, D.C. But hopping over here, this is back to Juan Passarelli's tweets. And guys, please be liking and retweeting all of these threads that I'm putting in the chat, just because getting this information out is so pivotal right now. Reviewing whether Lewis has read the case of Ahmed with regards to the European Court of Human Rights, the prosecution believes all issues that witness Lewis raised have been dealt with and rejected in that case. Witness Eric Lewis says every case is different and we cannot deal with one case looking at another case. Eric Lewis has a sip of coffee. Will he be held in contempt? Oh my gosh, this is so ridiculous. Let me see where Kevin and Mohammed are. And while I'm waiting for more tweets to populate here, just to break it down, so in case you don't remember or don't know what special administrative measures are, in the United States, special administrative measures constitute a form of solitary confinement and internationally would most likely be recognized as a form of torture. Special administrative measures basically place someone on a complete reporting lockdown to where their defense is not allowed to contact the media. The friends and family members that visit them are not allowed to contact the media. And there is also a communication restriction between visitors, guests, family members, and attorneys. So your mom can't talk to your brother, so to speak, about what is happening in your case if you're placed under special administrative measures. You generally, but not always, don't have access to any type of media, whether it's print, whether it's TV, whether it's radio. You don't get to communicate with the outside world. If you are in a special administrative measures situation, you are allowed to communicate with your attorneys and a couple selected individuals, if and only if the court decides to let you at predetermined times. We looked at this with Reality Winner's case as well, even though I don't think she was as hard as it was to get in with her. You're only allowed to view evidence and things like that in SCIFs if it is classified information. So you have to go to Washington, D.C. or the Eastern District of Virginia to even be able to look at the evidence that's being presented against you or have your attorney look at it. on top of everything else, on top of the reporting restrictions, on top of the communication restrictions, on top of not being able to even read a newspaper while being in a cell for 22 to 24 hours a day. It's pretty gruesome, it's pretty brutal, and it shouldn't exist. That is cruel and unusual punishment, and it shouldn't be tolerated. And just the fact that that exists should be cause for dismissal in this, because you cannot have a more politically motivated sentence than special administrative measures here in the U.S. So Eric Lewis continues explaining the unique difficulties under the special administrative measures in national security cases. To meet with a client in a room in the prison can't always deal with all documents. Lewis continues, this is Eric Lewis, the witness. Another difference in this case, besides a lot of national security information here, is the mental health issues raised. Mr. Assange would be especially vulnerable. For a decade now, for over 3,500 days, Julian Assange has been illegally and arbitrarily detained according to the United Nations, and according to the UN, must be compensated for the time that he has lost in his life for this. So I'm going to drop the Defense Assange campaign's tweet in here from the chat for everyone. And let me just skim through to see if anybody has questions or comments or anything. Right, I agree. James Lewis is being paid to prosecute. Therefore, he is biased, and anything he said should be struck from the hearing, according to James Lewis's own logic. I like that, and that if James Lewis gets called to the stand, that would be a very interesting question of who's paying you to be here today. Are you biased? Is the U.S. influencing you in any way? It doesn't look like Kevin has anything new up right now. But I got about 10 minutes before I need to start wrapping up here. So I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. There's nothing big that's going on that I'm not seeing. So does anyone have any questions before I start to close out here about special administrative measures, about what has happened so far today in court? Please drop those into chat. I can see that other people are live right now, but I don't know if they are actually covering this. I see someone just put out a live video about Joe Biden. That's wonderful. I'm glad that in the middle of the biggest trial of free speech, there's still independent content creators worried about a man with really late stage Alzheimer's or dementia or whatever the fuck he has going on. We have another tweet that just came in from the @Defense Assange. In this case, William Barr likely to make national security discussion to put Assange in special administrative measures. When you say no risk of arbitrariness, I cannot agree with you. And I believe that was witness Lewis telling prosecutor Lewis that William Barr is in charge of the Defense Department. He's in charge of all of this. He's going to put Assange in special administrative measures, and that it is arbitrary. That the way that they enforce this, there's really no rhyme or reason. There's actually, if I believe properly, you don't even get to appeal special administrative measures for at least a year, if at all. So let me refresh one, and Mohammed Almazi and Kevin Gostola. And again, please show these guys some love. Kevin Gostola is doing a great job. Mohammed Almazi, Juan Passarelli, the Assange defense team here on Twitter. So I am getting these threads loaded up. It looks like we have a couple new ones from Kevin. This read from Babar Ahmad from the Fair Trials is relevant, especially the court paid tribute to the procedural safeguards in place in the American legal system, considering them sufficient to ensure respect for human rights. So I would like to let me see where this goes. It's just a little screenshot. So hop into Kevin Gastola's tweet thread if you want to read that. But Lewis says, Eric Lewis, the witness, says this is not a terrorist case. He adds Bill Barr will make a decision relying upon the views with respect to national security when determining whether or not to authorize special administrative measures. Gina Haspel, who is a fucking torture freak at a black site prison, will help make the determination. So, a woman who's a known torturer is going to make the decision on whether or not to keep torturing. Does that make sense? Does anybody? If that makes sense to you, raise your hand. Let me hop over here to see where everyone else is at. Juan Passarelli has a couple more tweets up. He says, where he left off, Eric Lewis had a sip of coffee. Will he be held in contempt? That's probably my favorite tweet, at least so far. Well, no, I think it's on par with fucking James Lewis getting pissed at the judge because she couldn't carry harder for the prosecution, even though she already literally does everything they fucking want and reads every pre-prepared statement, met in the back of the room with the prosecutors, and then walked up to the front and gave a ruling. Like, anyways, where are we? Juan Passarelli. Eric Lewis had a sip of coffee. Will he be held in contempt? And then he continues by sharing some of the tweets from the Assange defense. Prosecution quotes Joshua Dartel. Special administrative measures causes irreparable, something difficulty in dealing with clients. Witness Lewis says Sams makes it difficult to prepare for a trial, but creates issues of unfairness when dealing with national security cases, as in this one. Lewis explains the unique difficulties under the special administrative measures in national security cases. Met with a client in a room in the prison, we cannot always deal with all of the documents involved. The reason they cannot always deal with all of the documents involved is because while they are meeting, the prosecution literally gets to watch the meeting with the lawyer. There's no, under special administrative measures, no client-lawyer confidentiality, which I think is really important because that is a continuation of what we've seen since 2016 with the UC Global case and the spying on Julian and the Ecuadorian embassy. James Lewis is using references to the European Court of Human Rights concerning terrorism cases. This is not a terrorism case. This is a journalism case. And this just shows the expansion of the national security state, what some people call the deep state, where the U.S. prosecution is now having to rely on legal precedent set in terrorism cases to prosecute a journalist. Like, we throw it back to this a lot, but if you read the National Counterintelligence Defense Strategy from 2020 through 2022, we know why the prosecution is making these cases and why the prosecution is referencing court decisions specifically in regards to terrorism while dealing with a journalist. It's because in the National Counterintelligence Defense Strategy for 2020 to 2022, they list hacktivists, leaktivists, and public disclosure organizations in the same category as Al Qaeda, Al Nusra, and ISIS. So, publishing and disclosing information, being a journalistic news outlet that reveals information, is akin to being ISIS now, which is fucking insane. Um, but that is how they have been able to build a case like this, because why not, right? It's ridiculous. But just to finish up, because I have to hop off of here in just a little bit. In any case, William Barr will likely William Barr likely to make the national security decision to put Assange in special administrative measures. When you say there is no risk of arbitrariness, I cannot agree with you. The prosecution is working to establish that Ahmed's ruling decided that the application of SAMS did not breach the European Convention on Human Rights. The prosecution asks if Lewis does not know what issues the defense will raise, how can he opine on whether those will make it impossible to defend in court? Lewis said, because I have read the indictment. WikiLeaks leaked 1 million documents which the U.S. government said are national security information. And that is why Julian runs the risk of being put in special administrative measures if he is extradited to the United States. This must be stopped because at this point it's just a show. We are literally in real time reading through how our First Amendment right is equivalent to terrorism in the eyes of the U.S. prosecution. And it's fucking sad. It's fucking sad that other independent media members aren't out here reading along this too. Because this is their jobs as well. This is their life and livelihood that is going to be taken from them as soon as the U.S. is allowed to do it. We already have mass censorship. Julian Assange is facing 175 years in prison for doing what every other journalist does. Specifically to the point that in previous days of this court trial, it had to be brought up that other journalistic institutions also solicit classified information. So we're just going to let every journalist that's ever released anything be arrested at this point, simply because the United States is such a fucking international bully that they believe they are above the law, that they are above transparency, that they are above even following their own laws. But I am going to have to hop off here. We are going to be outside the Department of Justice today from 3 until 6 p.m. Kimber is going to be leading those, our wonderful mean panda. I do hope that everything with Steve is going over well. He was having some personal life emergencies, so I hope that that situation is getting better. If you could, please continue to retweet these threads that we were just going through. This is at Defense Assange, at J Passarelli, at M Elmazi, and at K Gustola. Demand that other people cover this too. There's no reason that people can't be up reading tweets. It's literally what they do for a living. So yeah, I appreciate everybody watching. You can find us at @_4 Assange on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook as well, even though we aren't as active on there. Please join our Discord if you have not already, to help with organizing and just to overall build the community that we are all in now. And don't forget our calls to action that are up on the website. We have 3 different ones: contacting the department, multiple, not 3. Contacting the Department of Justice, contacting the Pardon Administration, contacting congressional candidates, and coordinating with Reporters Without Borders, contacting Her Majesty's Courts and Prisons, demanding that the audio link either become available to the general public or at the very least non-governmental organizations and politicians around the world. But thank you. Thank you. I look forward to speaking with you guys tonight to go over the rest of this court case because, as we know, James Lewis, QC, is drawing this out as long as possible. Yeah, thank you guys.